you had told me on our last episode a year ago that I would be running for mayor, I would have probably slapped you. I would have fell off my chair laughing. Maybe we can get people re-involved in this political process. I had 12-year-old kids that would ride by on a bike and say, "You're the mayor, innit?" And I'd be like, "I know you can't vote, but I'm amazed you even know who I am," which at least is a positive thing. And then at the end of the day, what I'm really trying to do is empower people to take their lives to the next level. That's what I've been doing with this show for the past 10 years. And that is the message, ultimately. You kind of want less government for that. Maybe we can re-engage people with the political process. It's brutal, it's a grind. All of the trolling, all of the media, all of the nastiness, all that stuff. And it's one thing for me to handle it, but for friends and family, like they take it personally. And I'll be like, tell my wife, I'm like, "Honey, stay off the damn forums, please. I told you to." But everybody takes it personally. And I just thought to myself, very few people want to be in this situation.
People like us, we don't think government is God. I'm not going to tell you I'm here to save your life. I can't save you. Ronald Reagan said the worst 8 words in the American language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." They've tricked everybody into thinking the reverse, that the government is supposed to help you and save you and organize your life and give you all of these things. So really what we need, beyond getting decent people to run, we need better education. I mean, it sounds cliche at some level, but we need to show people that the way you're thinking about your relationship with government is completely backwards. Do I think it's the government's job to make sure that I have a job or make sure that I'm paid a certain amount? Why would you think that that system is going to treat you right? It's going to treat you like a cog. That's it.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go? This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dave Rubin, the American political commentator, talk show host, international speaker, and author. Your show, The Rubin Report, is recognized for its politically incorrect and open approach to discussing fundamental principles such as freedom of speech. You have millions of subscribers and regularly interview guests like Sam Harris, Ben Shapiro, and Candace Owens. You've also toured with Dr. Jordan Peterson, hosting over 120 speaking events in 20 countries. And last year, you released the New York Times bestseller, Don't Burn This Book, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason, the definitive account of our current political upheaval and your guide to surviving it. Dave, welcome back to London Real.
Brian, it's good to be with you. And I've also done London Real once before, so I feel that my career is somewhat complete now.
It truly is. I checked, and it's just been over a year since you were here last time. Last time we had to stream from our new digital freedom platform because I was going head to head with our censorship battle with YouTube, and we can talk about that. And then I decided to run for mayor of London, Dave. So I might just bring you up to speed with what happened. We spent 9 months going head to head, and we nearly won. We spent millions of pounds. I went all in on this. We had a digital battle bus that I was driving around London and live streaming from the back. We logged 5,700 miles in the city of London. We did the largest outdoor ad campaign in British history, political history. We were ranked second in all the bookmakers worldwide for the whole campaign, actually ahead of the conservative candidate. We created a 50-page manifesto with detailed policies on the economy, crime, housing, transport. We had 10 million visitors to our website globally, 1.5 million shares. We served up 1.5 billion impressions of digital media. We had serious attack ads going after the incumbent and calling him out on all of his policies. We got 100 pieces of media, mainstream media, which was obviously pretty brutal on me, but 2-page spread in the Times of London, 2-page spread in the Evening Standard, covered by The Sun, the BBC, ITV, of course, with their own spin on it. But in the end, we were defeated by the woke, Labour, left-leaning mayor. And he kind of spun this narrative back to the people that they were actually looking out for the people when actually they weren't growing the economy. They were taxing people, a lot like what's going on with you and Callie. Also, we got stopped by the police in the middle of the campaign, Dave, and I got banned from campaigning. They fined my team. They tried to intimidate us. It was crazy. We also got disinvited from debates. We were not included on the mainstream media, even though, like I said, we were in second place according to the bookies. And we really fought back, but we had our own media channels. I had more subscribers than some of the mainstream papers. And so we fought back, and I think we really made an impression here. But in the end, you know, this city got co-opted into this narrative that maybe you see happening in California or maybe nationwide, that this Labor Party is looking out for the working man when, like I said, their taxes are regressive. They hurt them the most. They had no solutions for the economy. They locked this whole place down for a year. And I was coming up with real policies, but they kind of feared everyone back into this election. So I'm telling you, I went through the ringer, Dave. And the upside is, though, is I think that YouTube now is a little bit more careful when it comes to banning me. But we're going to find out today, Dave.
Yeah, I suppose we will find out. I'm sure they're not that thrilled with me these days as well. Wait, so first off, how much longer then is Sadiq Khan's reign of terror in London? How long has that now been extended to?
Yeah, well, first of all, by the way, he was unelected for a year because they postponed elections last year because of the COVID crisis. So literally, he was in office making decisions for a year with no remit. Now it's been extended for 3 more years. And we've got 3 more years of this nonsense. I'm telling you, every taxi I get into now, and we're after the election now, says, Brian, like, we voted for you. What are we going to do with all these road problems, the crime problems, the knife crime? The economy still hasn't come back. And I said, look, we're going to keep moving forward. We have our own political party, the London Real Party. We're still pushing our agendas. But, you know, it was a setback. And I'll be honest, we really, really wanted and thought we were going to win. We were out there with the people in the streets. My team went all out, but it's frustrating. And the reason I ran, Dave, is because I live in this city. It's my home. My kids were born here. I plan on being buried here. It's like my home now. And so I just couldn't sit by and watch these current politicians run it into the ground. And, you know, if I hadn't run, I don't even think it would have been much of a race. So, you know, it was my first time. I learned a lot about the political process, more than a political science degree, that's for sure. But yeah, we've got 3 more years of Sadiq Khan, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, look, the fact that a guy like you got involved, a guy like Lawrence Fox got involved, outsiders who are trying to do something sane in an insane system, that is a good sign. You know, look, okay, so you didn't win this time. I suspect it probably won't be your last time. And if nothing else, you showed those people, the good, decent people who are the citizens of London, the cab drivers and the people who work in the pubs and everything else, like, people have to get involved. It's one thing for us to talk about these ideas all day long, but one of the things that I mention on my show is that we can't just talk. We've got to do. We've got to recall governors. We've got to build new places of education. We have to build new tech. We have to do all of the things because the progressives, in an American context, sort of your Labor Party, our Democratic Party, they're not for anyone. They're not for small business. They're not for minorities. They're for power. Every single policy that they put forth is taking from someone to give to someone else, as long as it fits in their intersectional diagram of insanity. If they wanted to be for people, if you wanted to be for people, what would you do? Well, first off, you wouldn't take so much of their money. You'd say to people, hey, we, the government, don't need to be this endless black hole of money sucking, you know, awfulness. What we could actually do is let you keep most of your stuff, and we, the government, will stay slim and trim, and basically will stay out of your lives. We will fund roads. We will fund the police. I know that's very controversial in America, and apparently it's starting to become controversial in the UK as well. That's what a functional government would do. By the way, in an American context, that's what functional governments are doing in places like Florida and places like Texas and places like Tennessee. Now, unfortunately, I'm here in California, which is a one state or one party state, the Democrats. I've got a ridiculous governor in Gavin Newsom, who we are recalling, although unfortunately, I don't have much hope that he'll actually be taken out, you know, because a recall just resets the election. It doesn't automatically remove him. He can run again in the recall, and most likely he will win because we don't have a great crew of people doing exactly what you did, which is saying, I'll take the bullet. I will get involved in this thing. I will put my life on the line. I mean that sort of literally and figuratively, because politics is so messy. I will take the salvos. I will let them write the hit pieces, all of those things. People just don't want to do it. And I'm very empathetic to that, obviously. Plenty of people have asked me to do it. I've had plenty of money people say, Dave, we'll back you, just get involved. And it's like, I don't know that I could do all the awful things it would take to get through that machine. And in some ways, that was Trump's greatest credit, in a way, his greatest skill, that he was willing to do all of the bad stuff that you got to do and work through it. But in the end, it didn't even work for him. So politics is very messy. But generally speaking, we all are fighting the same thing right now, whether it's you in London, whether it's me in Los Angeles, whether it's someone watching this in the Middle East or in India or in Mexico. The growing monster that is leftism, wokeism, progressivism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it, this centralized power that wants to pit us against each other and reorganize the world order as it sees fit. That's what we're all fighting against. And I think the silver lining is that people are waking up. And the question always is, well, how much destruction can it wrought before we actually do something about it?
You know, I realized last year that we're basically in an information war. And I know you've called it kind of similar things when you're over there. I mean, when I got, banned on YouTube, it was April 6th last year, second largest YouTube live stream in the world, then banned and deleted on YouTube afterwards. I started to realize that it really is an information war. And if people can control information, they can control people, control votes, control actions. And as long as that narrative continues to be able to take place in what typically is left-leaning technology platforms and media, it makes it really hard. And Dave, you're right. They put me through the ringer here in the newspapers. I mean, they were going after everything they could to try to rip me down. And yet when I spoke for anybody on the public on the streets for 5 minutes, whether, they were young, they were old, they were an immigrant, they were not, whatever religion, within 5 minutes they said, okay, that makes sense. And we hate the current mayor. I would love to vote for you. But I couldn't get that message out on a mass scale, even though I had the digital platforms. We got close, but it still feels like going up against a wave of this. How do you see that? And do you see it changing?
Well, look, as a guy named David, David beat Goliath. That's the old story. And I believe that Dave can beat Google. I believe the little guy can beat the big guy. It's the greatest human story that there is. I would say we've gone from an information war to really just a war on truth at this point. And the way I would say that shifted is, you're right, we were in an information war, meaning for the last, let's say, 10 years, we all got on Twitter, we all got on YouTube and Facebook and all of these things. We have simply no idea how they've been manipulating us. We have little hints about it, when they've said, okay, you can't post this, or we delete accounts. And we always know it always leans right when they're getting rid of people and banning people. But we really have no sense the extent that shadow bans have hid information from people, the way they've been able to inflate certain stories and deboost other stories and reorganize search results. I mean, there's so many pieces of this that truly, I don't think anyone, I actually don't even think whoever they are, I don't think anyone really understands what this information war has now become. Like, I don't know that Jack at Twitter truly knows who's shadow banning who and when they're shadow banned and when Twitter people can read your DMs and all the rest of it, or that even the top engineer at Google truly understands the algorithm and how videos are suggested. Like, I just don't think, I think that there is the machines are on, you know what I mean? Like, we're in the rise of the machines in essence. But the reason I would say we've gone from an information war for those 10 years dealing with all that to now a war on truth is that, look, here in America, half the country, wanted to open up, half the country wanted to lock down, half the country thought that the election was stolen, half the country didn't. Half the country thought that Brett Kavanaugh was a rapist, half the country didn't. Half the country thought that Jesse Smollett was the victim of a hate crime, half the country. I could go on with the endless amount of things that we are now split by. And the simple truth is, it's almost impossible to know what your neighbor thinks. So the people that literally live next door to me, I have no idea if they believe in a similar reality than I believe in. And I don't know at this point because big tech has become so ubiquitous, because we're all wandering around with this device and how it's manipulating us and whether it's listening to us or reorganizing results based on what our interests are, whatever it might be. I don't know how we mitigate that. I don't know how we get something to feel like a national ethos again. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. I think the best thing you can do is care about your local community, start really within your household, your family, and then build out, a very bottom up way of living. And I think a lot of people are turning to that. I also think that there's going to be more of a backlash against big tech growing. I think people are going to realize, they called it social media. The implication was that it would make us more social. But we all know, after the first couple of years of Facebook where you connected with some old friends and it was sort of fun and, oh, I can't believe that old high school friend is now doing this or that. Next thing you know, you've started to hate everybody. You're angry at people all the time. We doom scroll on Twitter where you just look for things to make you angry. And then, of course, they built in these technological tricks like infinite scroll where it never stops. So pages never stop and your brain just keeps going and going and going. That's why I do my August off the grid thing. But basically, we have to figure out how do we connect a country from an American perspective. We've got about 350 million people here. Well, now we're all starting to believe very, very different things. And how do we make sure that those founding documents that are so precious, that have freed so many people over generations, how do we make sure that they're still respected and honored and obeyed? I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't think anyone has a good handle on that right now.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And I've spoken with some serious experts on my show about the phenomenon, about the technology Silicon Valley builds. And these are $1 trillion of capital going in to create devices that are more addictive than anything we've known. And, I struggled with drugs in my past life, but there's nothing more addictive than what's on your phone. And it can move your emotions up and down and left and right. And it can control this narrative and you don't even know what's happening. And, last year, Dave, I would meet people on the streets and I'd say, I'm being censored right now on YouTube. And they'd be like, oh, I heard about that one thing, but that's not anymore, is it? I'm like, every single thing is censored. I call it the Mr. Rogers channel now, because all I can do is put up Mr. Rogers content because I can't say anything about, a disease, a mask, a vaccine, a lab. And so again, people, they don't honestly know what's happening. And the same with shadow bans and agenda engines. And I just don't know if people have woke up to the fact that it's happening. And I don't know. I feel like it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. What I would say is the more we come in contact with each other, the better. I mean, when I was out on the streets talking to people, then everything went along the wayside and people said, oh, now I know who you are, Brian. I can see who you are. But when it's my digital persona, it can be controlled and manipulated. And I agree with you. I think some of the people at the top, they don't even know what's going on. And that's a little scary because it can go somewhere that maybe they don't even know where it is anymore. And maybe they can't turn it off.
Well, that's in essence, that's sort of where we're at, right? Like the machines have turned on. From a Terminator perspective, Skynet is on and we can't shut it off. So there was a moment during, every few months we have these nonsensical hearings on Capitol Hill where they drag in Zuckerberg from Facebook and Jack Dorsey from Twitter and the rest of them. And in one of the hearings, I tweeted at Jack and I said, do you shadow ban? And he responded to me and wrote no. And I thought that was pretty interesting because, okay, so now you're saying you don't shadow ban, but does that really mean anything? Because however you define shadow ban, like, I don't know how he defines shadow ban. So I think it's become so many lies are just sort of sitting everywhere. And by the way, I'm not saying this guy is purely evil. He's built something that I spend an awful lot of time on. I wish I spent less time on it. I try not to be on it on the weekends, but I'm not saying these people are all evil. In a weird way, Mark Zuckerberg, sometimes I have an odd amount of sympathy for him because there was a real interesting moment in one of the hearings when AOC, who's just the queen of ridiculousness, when she basically was saying to him, you need to censor hate speech, and which really was outsourcing tyranny, right? I mean, she's a government official pressuring a private company, the head of a private company, to censor speech. That's against the First Amendment. I mean, that's in essence the government coercion on speech. Mm-hmm. He basically looked at her and he's like, I can't do that. That's not what I do. Now, he's made all sorts of, I think, mistakes and misjudgments along the way. But again, it's like these guys, they started something 20 years ago. They had no idea what it was going to turn into. And I think the only thing we can do is get out there, talk to real people, really try to figure out new ways to connect with people. And the irony, of course, is that those new ways are really the old ways, which is just face-to-face meeting. And then, in the last year and a half, they locked us down. So we had a big tech problem. We had an information problem. And then suddenly they locked us down. And then we're on these things probably, I don't know, everyone probably tripled their usage, if not more, in the last year and a half, which was probably the worst thing that we could have done.
Yeah, no, really well said. And I guess I hadn't thought of the Skynet reference, but I think you're right. And the algo now is optimizing for clicks, emotions, and it'll just keep spinning that algo up to maximize the attention grab, which probably turns into ad dollars. And that's a little worrying if that's gotten
well, Brian, think about it this way. On YouTube, on any given moment, there's suggested videos on the right side of the video, on the right side, right? So let's say somebody really is enjoying this conversation between us. Well, YouTube could just decide, and I would love to talk to a YouTube engineer about this. By the way, these companies you would think they're these giant sort of amorphous companies that are in every part of our lives. It's funny, they have no PR people. You never see anyone get interviewed anywhere. Remember, Jack did go on Joe Rogan one time, but somehow they have no PR teams. No one ever explains anything. Imagine if you got locked out of your Gmail. Could you call Google? I mean, it's just incredible how big they've become. But just think about it this way. People that are watching this right now, let's say they're somewhat politically aligned with us. Well, if YouTube wanted, could YouTube not very easily just say, boy, Brian and Dave are pretty scary. We're going to suggest all counter stuff in that bar right there because we don't want people watching too much of this. Now, I'm not accusing them of doing it, but I'm saying we just don't know what they could be doing to us. And because their lack of transparency is so huge, it only can let you think about the worst.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I think about it sometimes, and we're getting back into broadcasting, so I'm going to have to address this, even more. Dave, you said something about getting people more involved in the political process. And I know you're talking about the recall of the governor. And one of the things we were doing is we were live streaming every single day from the back of the bus. I was answering questions live on IG. I was out there talking to the people, and people walk up to me and they said, I've never seen a politician on the streets talking to as many people as they would want. I've never seen anybody live streaming, answering questions in real time. And we were thinking, maybe we can get people re-involved in this political process. I had 12-year-old kids that would ride by on a bike and say, you're the mayor, innit? And I'd be like, I know you can't vote, but I'm amazed you even know who I am, which at least is a positive thing. So I do think that if we see our politicians, and who knows, maybe you'll be one of them, Dave, getting out there with their media platforms and streaming. I mean, Trump did a little of this with Twitter, but imagine with video, maybe we can re-engage people with the political process because, over here, it seemed like most people started to care a day or two before the election. They kind of voted and they kind of went on with their lives. And it was a little frustrating because these people in power are controlling everything, their livelihoods, their children's education, their health, their freedoms. I don't know. I'd like to think that hopefully we can get people more involved.
Well, I think the way we get people more involved is that the generations younger than us old timers talking right now, they are growing up in this time where the expert class has failed them related to politics, related to COVID and lockdowns, completely failed them every week. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask, stay in your house, don't stay in your house. You're going to die. You're not going to die. They don't trust anybody. I mean, when I do college events and I talk to 18, 19-year-olds, if I say CNN, if I'm giving a talk and I just mention CNN, that's the punchline to them. They laugh at CNN. So the entire trusted class that we grew up with, where, you trusted an academic class, you trusted a scientific class, you trusted a political class or a media class, at least at some level, that has been completely blown up for these people. Now, does that mean that everyone involved was bad all the time? Of course not. Of course not. And I try not to impugn everybody's motives, and everyone has selective pressures and everything else. Like Fauci, for example, do I think he's a truly bad man? Probably not. I think he got way over his head and then sort of enjoyed the fame, and he liked going on these shows. And then there's some weird part of having power where you just want to exercise it all the time. And then it's wear a mask, don't wear a mask, stay at home, lockdown schools, and you just start saying stuff. So that's not to excuse any of the things that any of these people have done. But the point is, young people look at all of these people and they're like, man, you guys have failed us. And then you throw in some of the more crazy social justice stuff where you're not allowed to say that there are biological differences between men and women. We all know that there are. So now a young person's going, wait a minute. My parents' generation and the expert class literally can't say that men have penises and women have vaginas. That's too controversial for them. So for them, I think the whole thing has been blown apart. And I think what we can do, and what I'm really trying to do, is show them that there are some adults still here. I'm not perfect at this, but I'm trying to do something. You're trying to do something. There are voices that are trying to put the pieces together. What I'm really trying to figure out is, does the entire thing have to burn now? Like, do all the universities have to go down? Does all the media have to go down? Like, the New York Times is evil at this point, absolutely evil. We covered this on my show yesterday. I don't know if any of your viewers saw this. It was so extraordinary. They ran a piece, an op-ed in the Times called "The Myth of Coexistence in Israel." And they showed a map, a series of 4 maps of Palestine shrinking. Well, it's a completely fabricated map because, as I'm sure you know, there was no country known as Palestine. And then I don't have to get into all the details about that. But then the next day, they issued a correction where they said that the map that they showed next to this op-ed piece, it wasn't supposed to be factual. It was just a work of art to illustrate the point in the op-ed piece. So basically, they're telling you, we just make up things. We make up things and we put it in our paper to fit our narrative. I think people have really woken up to this. I think nobody is watching CNN going, this is true. Yes, there's a certain amount of sort of blue anon people that just don't get it, that are going that route. But the ratings are tanking. More people are getting their news from places like this. And we just got to keep pushing and pushing and have faith. I always have faith in the human mind. That's the thing. I believe in human ingenuity. I believe that young people can fix things. And I believe that we can do it. I don't think the monster can eat all of us. I just don't think it can. But how many of us can it eat, and how much destruction? That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, that is the question. And, it's something that Dr. Jordan Peterson said when he was in this studio on the speaking tour over here in London. He said, Brian, we've now realized that people aren't as stupid as we thought they were. And he said, we've seen that they can now, consume a long form piece of content, or, him debating Sam Harris on a stage at the O2 Arena where Beyonce played a few months earlier that I took my wife to, and people come to that by the tens of thousands. I do agree with you. I think people now, we're starting to realize they can appreciate a nuanced argument. They do see character behind headlines. So I agree with you. I guess we got to keep doing what we're doing and keep pushing forward. The tide is turning to independent. It's just riddled with potholes of technology and other pieces and what's going on with politics.
What other tricks do they have up their sleeve, in essence? That's the question.
And they have quite a few. And look, the New York Times is a shame. I'm surprised I even still glance at it every now and then, but I do. But when I do, I just see agenda now, to where it almost makes me laugh out loud. It doesn't even look like news to me because it's always through a lens of their own liberal or whatever agenda it is. And it's so obvious to me now. It started becoming obvious a few years ago, but now it's so blatant where it's not even news anymore. And it's just a shame that it purports to be that. And I hope you're right. I think our younger generation is seeing it. And look, they are getting their news from other sources right now. And we had a YouTuber throw his hat in the race here, and the mayor of London, who did quite well. And I think that was a vote from the kids saying, we're tired of the establishment. And again, you've got to listen to that. And I do think there's some hope in that as well. I want to ask you about Cali, because it's my home state. I was born in Costa Mesa, California. I moved to San Diego, California when I was 2 years old. I spent 18 years of my life there before I went off to school at MIT in Boston. I spent a couple summers there working in the aerospace industry. And, it's a place I always thought of as home. I also lived in New York City, but I decided last year I would never move back to either one of those places because it all seemed crazy. Now, Dave, you're the last man standing in California, but in this space of the intellectual dark web, you're one of the few left, Shapiro picked up and left. Obviously, Rogan went to Austin. I know you're off there, soon, and a lot of people have gone with him. You've decided to stay. You've decided to keep calling out the politicians. I know, people want you to run for office. tell me, first of all, what's it like being in California? And why did you feel like it was necessary to stay?
Well, first, I should tell you that right when I end with you today, I'm hopping on a plane and going to Austin, Texas for a couple of days. So I won't say why, but I am doing that.
Okay.
Look, my feeling was that you have to at least try to stay and fight. So California has had really terrible progressive blue policies forever. And each individual city has been hurt worse depending on how blue they've gone. So a place like San Diego, where you used to live, actually has done pretty well, because even though they've had some Democratic mayors, they've been a little more moderate. I think people in San Diego, because of the sunshine, are wired a little more coolly, and it's basically okay there. San Francisco, which everyone knows has become an abject disaster. Well, who was the mayor of San Francisco when everything started going to crap? It was Gavin Newsom, who of course now is the governor of California. We've got Eric Garcetti here, who's just another leftist buffoon, who I'm told now is going to be our ambassador to India, which I guess is good that he's going there. But, they'll probably, I don't even know who the deputy mayor is, but I'm sure it will be someone just as bad as him. But what they do in all of these cities is they raise taxes, that hurts business. They increase regulation, that hurts business. Housing prices then go up. Homelessness then increases. Drug use then continues. They then throw money at everything. That suddenly then they see homelessness, they start throwing money at it. But money doesn't solve homelessness, right? There's mental health issues to talk about. There's infrastructure issues to talk about. But they just throw money at everything, and they take from all of their top producers. And then what happens? I mean, we are watching this happen right now. All of the top producers and the idea capital people, they're all fleeing to Florida right now. So Silicon Valley is no longer in San Francisco. It is now in Miami. Miami, with a Republican mayor, Francis Suarez. I'm going to Miami in a couple of weeks to interview him. He's saying, hey, come here, low taxes, low regulation, a great international city, like let's make it work. And all of the tech people are fleeing, bringing their companies, bringing their ideas, and San Francisco is actually being destroyed. LA has a certain version of that as well. We brought in the former DA, this guy, George Gascon, who ruined San Francisco. Well, now he's our DA in Los Angeles. Of course, he's Bernie backed, and he's a straight white guy who deposed our first ever Black female DA. Now, I don't care about identity politics, but you would think that Bernie wouldn't be backing a straight white guy against our first ever Black female DA. She was far better than him, by the way. But yeah, we're not arresting people over crimes. We're allowing people to just riot in the streets. Where I live off the main drag over here, you've still got stores boarded up and still closed. And it's like, how is any of this stuff going to come back? And what will they do? Well, Newsom will just pump money into everything. They feel that they can just keep printing money, that you can just keep taking money, and nothing will get better here. But to truly answer your question, the reason I've stayed, at least for now, is that if we really are at the point in the United States where good, decent people have to flee the blue states if you want to live freely, well, then the idea of the United States of America is truly over. Yes, we will have Florida and Texas and Tennessee. They'll be part of the separatists or something, if you can do a Star Wars reference with me. And then you'll have this decaying thing, this decaying piece of a republic. And if we're really there, then that's a very scary place to be, because ultimately we'll be warring between the states. I mean, if that's really where we are. Now, maybe we're at the beginnings of that. But my feeling was, let me at least fight through the recall. So hopefully some decent people get involved. Caitlyn Jenner's running. I don't really think that's much of anything other than a publicity stunt. I hope I'm wrong. But maybe some good people get involved. I just don't think that can be me right now. I can affect things from the outside. And as I said to you before, politics is dirty, man. It's admirable what you did. I don't think I could do the things that it would take to go against such an evil, corrupt system here in California.
But maybe you would. Who knows?
Look, stranger things have happened, right? Yeah. Like you can push a man so far till he breaks. You can get somebody to the end of the road, and then they go, well, now what do I have to do?
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me on our last episode a year ago that I would be running for mayor, I would have probably slapped you. I would have fell off my chair laughing. I just never entered my realm of thought until I was watching the situation. I was watching what was happening. And I thought to myself, Dave, I got 2 young boys, they're 3 and 4 years old, and they're gonna ask me 20 years from now, what did you do, Daddy, in the great, crisis of 2021? Did you make some more YouTube videos or did you actually do something? And I was just like, you know what? I've gotta do something about it. But it's definitely, it's brutal, it's a grind. About a month before the elections, I looked around what was going on with me, with all of the trolling, all of the media, all of the nastiness, all that stuff. And it's one thing for me to handle it, but for friends and family, like they take it personally. And I'll be like, tell my wife, I'm like, honey, stay off the damn forums, please. I told you to, but everybody takes it personally. And I just thought to myself, very few people want to be in this situation. And I've also thought to myself, it's probably a very strange person that can even be in this situation because...
Well, that's the key part, right? Yeah. Because people like us, we don't think government is God. So I'm not here to... Let's pretend I was running. It would be like, I'm not going to tell you I'm here to save your life. I can't save you. Ronald Reagan said the worst 8 words in the American language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. It's like they've tricked everybody into thinking the reverse, that the government is supposed to help you and save you and organize your life and give you all of these things. So really what we need, beyond getting decent people to run, we need better education. I mean, it sounds cliche at some level, but we need to show people that the way you're thinking about your relationship with government is completely backwards. Government should be staying out of your life, not interjecting it to every part of your life. But too many people think, oh, if I can just get enough power, if I can just get the guy who I want to run the freaking thing, then all of my problems will be solved. And I don't know of a problem that government has really solved. Yes, we stopped Nazism. That was pretty good. We did that about 70 years ago. We've done some things when we can come together as a nation believing in the American spirit. But what has government done lately? What problem could you have? I can't even think of a problem truly that I could have where I would think, my God, it must be the government. Now, yes, police, roads, a couple basic things, but what real issue? Do I think it's the government's job to make sure that I have a job or make sure that I'm paid a certain amount or something like that? It's just a crazy, why would you think that system is going to treat you right? It's going to treat you like a cog. That's it.
Yeah, it's really well said. And, also I'm in the middle of the process thinking, I'm going to take a massive pay cut. I'm going to take all sorts of crazy amounts of hate. I'm going to have to try to push through my own policies with all sorts of resistance from all the other labor council members. And then at the end of the day, what I'm really trying to do is empower people to take their lives to the next level. That's what I've been doing with the show for the past 10 years. And that is the message ultimately. Yeah, you kind of want less government for that. You want less taxes and, allow the people to move forward. So yeah, it's a strange conundrum, but I mean, it's at least worth discussing. And of course, I'm on the tail end of this, so I can have a little perspective. It's interesting from London watching the differences between Florida, Texas, California, and New York City. And again, we saw the UFC, Dana White, first live event in Florida. The governor was there. The mayor was there. I think it was in Jacksonville. They all showed up to, work with business to get the economy going again. And Dana basically said, look, I'm willing to work with any city that wants to work with me, which means, guess what? We're not going to Cali or New York City anytime soon or to these other places. And it was fascinating to just see this dichotomy in America of a bunch of people who want to get on with their American lives and their freedoms, and then some other people that want to take a completely different agenda. And it's very strange to watch. I'm sure it's strange for you. You're living it. And yeah, I don't know where it goes from here, but
well, at some level, it's great in a way. I mean, in some ways, this is the federalism that the founders set up. They wanted the states to have most of the control. They wanted the federal government to not do much, which is why DC is not a state. Of course, the Democrats want it to be a state now because they wanted it to be this transient place where politicians would go and leave. They wanted them to mostly live in their own states. Now they want this, the Democrats want this concentrated power in DC to become a state and that we will federalize, in essence, everything. There's nothing that the modern Democrats don't want to federalize. They want laws, one law for the land. But the founders set it up so that most of the stuff, taxation, local laws, those things would matter depending on who you voted for in your local state. So right now, even though it feels really nuts, and especially from a Californian perspective, it sucks here, but we are actually watching the system work. The system's doing something really nice. It's like Florida's reaping the benefits of doing it right. Like the economy, as I just referenced, with all the tech people now going there, like their housing prices booming. California, for the first time in the history of California in 2020, had a population loss. It's never happened once in California. These things are not disconnected. So while it feels kind of crazy, I think, from a across the pond perspective, if you guys are looking at America and going, boy, it seems nuts. Florida is so different, and Texas and Jersey and Michigan. It's like, actually, what you're watching is a beautiful system. What you're watching, when it's done right, is an experiment, a constant experiment going on. And you, at least for now, have the ability to say, hey, I ran the experiment in Cali and I'm going to Texas. And by the way, nobody's going from red states to blue states. I mean, there's just nobody doing it. Nobody's going, man, I wish I lived in more lockdowns and paid higher taxes. I'm moving to California. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, it is great data points, and it's great to see. And, I won't go down the whole, road of the cases and all that. But when you look at, warm climates like Florida versus California, and they're completely different policies, and again, the economies, and then the movement of people, I mean, these are all massive data points to tell you what's working and what people want. And I'll be honest, Dave, we don't have that option here. We've got one country. It's been locked down by the national government when it has. I can't move around the country. I can't go to Europe now without a bunch of other issues. And Europe's got their own problems. And they've got their own mess ups over there. And sometimes they're locking down worse than us. And so, unfortunately, I can't vote by jumping in my car and taking my family somewhere. I've got to kind of ride this out. And I had someone come over to the studio recently, and she said, I said, this winter, there's going to be another variant. This is coming. And she said, I'm leaving. I had enough of this. And I said, I can't leave. I said, leaders don't leave, I mean, this is my show, London Real. I'm committed to the city. I'm going to have to be here in the trenches doing something. But it's not going to be pretty to go through another cycle like this in the winter. And I'm expecting some more bad news to come.
I suspect you're right, but I would hope that if people learned anything, if that red pilling moment happened for any subset of people in the last year, that when the lockdowns come again, because I agree they will come again, whether it's specifically related to COVID or climate lockdowns or God knows what they're going to come up with next, that I hope enough people will say, no, we're just not going to do it this time. And you can't arrest all of us. You can't send us all to gulags. And we're going to just not do it this time. We're going to live our lives as we see fit. And I think if enough of us do that, then we'll basically be okay. But it's admirable to stay and fight. But at the same time, you don't want to be the last guy in Dodge,
Yeah, I hope so. I really do. I had a Russian friend who grew up in Russia who lives here now. And he said, Brian, I really expected the citizens of this city in London to push back earlier. He said that they do the same thing in communist Russia. They control the information. They basically give us enough to live on, throw us some entertainment and a narrative, and people accept it. He said, I see the same thing happening here in what's supposed to be a free Western country. They throw you a furlough payment, throw you a little media, throw you a bone, make you feel like you've got a liberty back after taking it from you, and everybody complies. And I was a bit surprised too. So we will see. We'll keep talking and educating. Let me ask you about technology, Dave, because you've got your hand in tech, and you have with locals.com recently. I had George Farmer on last year, who's just become the CEO of Parler, which is amazing. Yep. He's a friend of ours. We just had Candace on the show a few weeks ago, and she said she'd be running as VP in 2024 with Trump as well. We can talk about that shortly. We raised $1.5 million for our Digital Freedom platform last year and streamed 57 episodes. And don't get me started, Dave, but much of those episodes that were being censored on YouTube, those things are now being discussed in mainstream media and by our president. Things that I was called all sorts of nasty things for publishing last year. Now it's considered the normal narrative, but we can talk about that shortly. You just raised...
Well, basically, reality is just about 3 months after the bullshit. That's pretty much where we're at this point.
I was vilified for having some of those guests on my show, and much of what they have said now is proving to be true or very considered to be a possibility. It's shocking. You just got, I think, a $3.8 million investment in Locals. Tell me about using tech to fight back, against, these trillions of dollars in this established, Silicon Valley, even if it's displaced to other places. Can it be done? How are you doing it? And what do you think we need to keep our eye on in order to be successful?